The New York Giants reportedly have their new offensive coordinator, and it looks to be a promising hire indeed. We're breaking it all down for you coming up next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, now the number one sports podcast network in America. My name's Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, welcome to our Everydayer Club members, to our Blue Crew community members, to our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, folks, we're coming to you a little bit earlier than usual because we've got some news in the land of the Giants. The New York Giants have reportedly hired their offensive coordinator, and it's a name that, believe it or not, despite the fact that he was out there and he was mentioned with some other teams, the name was never quite linked to the Giants. And in retrospect, probably should have been, given the connection, which we'll talk about. And that name, of course, is Matt Nagy. Matt was the offensive coordinator most recently for the Kansas City Chiefs, a non-play calling role. He worked with Andy Reid a second time. Actually, he's been with Andy Reid a long time. And he didn't call plays out in Kansas City, but he was an instrumental part of Andy Reid's coaching staff, even going back to, the days with the Eagles. He was a part of Andy Reid's staff. So we'll take a look at the hire itself. Then we'll take a look at why it's a good hire and the few concerns we might have about this particular hire. So that's what we're going to cover on today's program. Again, welcome to everybody. All right, let's get into it. All right, Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy, a Danella, New Jersey resident who, as mentioned, comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree. That is not a bad coaching tree to come from. Now, some people will say, well, those coaches generally don't have much success on a consistent basis once they leave Andy Reid's nest, if you will. But, to each his own. Matt Nagy's actually had some mixed success over his career. He's been very involved with quarterback development, for one, which is a staple of what he has done under Andy Reid. He's been a part of multiple postseason teams with the Chiefs, so that's certainly a positive. And he won the Coach of the Year. He was the head coach for the Chicago Bears for a few years. He won Coach of the Year in his first season in Chicago with Mitchell Trubisky as his quarterback. So that in itself was quite an accomplishment. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, I think Nagy came within like one play or something like that from making the postseason. So not a horrible coach by any stretch of the imagination. Now, and having done some research in what Matt Nagy's offenses and just his teams in general that he's been a part of, what they have done, they've been creative. Matt Nagy has a reputation as being a creative play caller who basically keeps things simple for the quarterback. So you won't see a complex offense, which is kind of what the Giants ran under Brian Daboll when he was the head coach here and the chief offensive architect, if you will. So Nagy keeps it pretty simple, if you will, which is a good thing because you've got a second-year quarterback in Jaxson Dart, who's going to gradually, get better. He's going to expand his offerings, but you don't want to dump too much on him. And, for what it's worth, Jaxson Dart did pretty well, in all things considered, get under the Brian Daboll offense, which, again, according to a lot of players that I've spoken with throughout Daboll's tenure, they all said the same thing, and that offense was very difficult to learn. So Matt Nagy coming in, maybe he's going to simplify things a little bit and make it so that the offense can play a little faster so that there's not as much in terms of miscommunications and all that stuff that kind of led to busted plays and timing issues and all that good stuff. So that's a positive there as well. His quarterbacks, Um, Matt Nagy has worked really, really well with quarterbacks who are mobile, number one, which Jaxson Dart is, and who can also operate off script. Because as we know in the NFL, very often a play doesn't quite go according to plan. It's very rare that that happens. So the really good quarterbacks are the ones who can operate off script and make something out of nothing. And that's something that, Nagy's system can help a young quarterback do. So that's certainly a positive there. Now, the other thing we need to mention here, Matt Nagy, just like John Harbaugh, come from that Andy Reid coaching tree. So there's a familiarity there. And you have to wonder, did John Harbaugh call Andy Reid up and say, hey, what do you think if I hire him? I wouldn't be surprised if that conversation took place. All right. Now, people are probably wondering, why didn't Andy Reid retain Matt Nagy? He let him go after his contract was up, and they hired Eric Bieniemy back to be the offensive coordinator. Matt Nagy, from what I understand, did not want to return to Kansas City. He wanted to get back into head coaching, which incidentally he interviewed for the Ravens job, I believe, before it went to Jesse Minter. But really the coaching cycle, because of all the unexpected additions that came out, Matt Nagy never really had a legitimate chance, I think, this year for this year's cycle. So that being said, he did interview for a lot of offensive coordinator roles, including the Eagles, and didn't get that one, obviously. So now he lands with Harbaugh and the Giants, who are going to trust him to basically develop that offense. And, I go back to something that I read, Bob Brookover of New Jersey Advanced Media, who has known John Harbaugh for a long time, did a Q&A in a recent article. And the takeaways from that article is that A, John Harbaugh has never had an offensive play caller who has never, who's been a first-time play caller, not in any year that he's been a head coach. So that kind of, gave you a clue as to maybe what he was thinking. But more importantly, Brookover asked Harbaugh, why is it that you never took a chance on a first-time play caller? And Harbaugh said that's because he's more involved tends to be more involved with the defense and special teams. So basically the offensive coordinator that they're bringing in is a guy that is going to have to operate pretty much by himself. I mean, that's not to say that Harbaugh won't check in on him and see, what he can contribute. But basically the guy that they were going to bring in had to be someone that knew what they were doing, that could operate independently, and just, work to get the most out of the offense. And the Giants have a good young offensive core for Matt Nagy to work with. So that's a little bit about Matt Nagy. Now, there's pros and there's cons to this hire. We will talk about the pros right after this. Hey, Giant fans, tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever before just to hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms, and they work with you to get every deduction possible. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver, and it gives you real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it. And for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file your taxes by February 28th and take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. February can be a lot. Flowers, candies, stuffed animals, and so much talk about relationships. And it can honestly feel like everyone else has it all together in their love life. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, dating, single, or just focusing on you, most people are still figuring it out. And no matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help you find your way. It can help you get clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some of the pressure off yourself. Therapy can help you recognize patterns that might be weighing relationships down. It can help you communicate better, set healthier boundaries, and stop carrying everything alone. And even if you're not in a relationship right now, therapy can help you feel more confident in what you want moving forward. The biggest thing, it reminds you that you're not behind, you're right on time. BetterHelp has licensed therapists in the US, and they do the initial matching for you so that you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do so at any time. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up this week on the Locked On Giants podcast, I'm going to try and get one of the guys from Locked On Chiefs to come on and give us a little bit more detailed scouting report, if you will, on Matt Nagy, the new offensive coordinator, or the reportedly new offensive coordinator hire by the Giants. The Giants still have not made any of their coaching hires official. Again, I think they're waiting basically to get them all in place, and then they'll send out one big release with everybody's name, and then we'll get everybody caught up on the names that we already know, as well as the names that maybe we don't know. So that's coming up eventually here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you'll be with us. All right. Also, just one note real quick. Make sure you check out the YouTube channel, Locked On Giants. We're doing the squad shows, the Giants squad show. Myself, Jay Berman, Mark Collins, breaking down all things Giants. We're on twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, live stream from 1 to 2 o'clock. Drop on by if you're not doing anything. All right, folks. Now, let's get back to the topic at hand here, shall we? All right, so Matt Nagy, let's talk about this. All right, why is this a good hire for the Giants? It's a good hire because of basically where this Giants offense is at this point in time, right? Jaxson Dart, Malik Neighbors, Cam Scatterbo, Theo Johnson, Tyrone Tracy. So last year, if I asked you, okay, what was the Giants' offensive identity? You probably would be hard-pressed to come up with one, right? Now, with Matt Nagy, what's interesting is in the past, he's been kind of accused, if you will, of not having an identity. But that was more when he was with the Bears and, he was in charge of the whole team. With an offensive identity, though, you want to keep things kind of simple. You want to, gradually build up and not dump a whole lot on the offense's plate. So that's something that Matt Nagy does. And, here's the other thing that I really like about it. It's continuity, if you think about it, for Jaxson Dart. And by that, I mean, Mike Kafka wasn't involved with the offense when Brian Daboll was the head coach. Granted, it was more of the Buffalo system that Daboll ran when he was an offensive coordinator. But there were elements of KC involved in that offense. And then when Daboll, of course, was let go, Kafka took over, and the offense took on more of a Kansas City flavor, if you will. So there's an opportunity now for them to build on that, to keep the continuity going. Even though it's going to be a different play caller in his ear, it's an opportunity for Jaxson Dart to just keep that flow going. All right. So that's one big advantage I see with this hire. Another one, Matt Nagy, in his stops with the Chiefs, he helped Patrick Mahomes develop into a top-tier quarterback. And the biggest thing that Matt Nagy was able to do with Patrick Mahomes, he was able to get through to him in terms of being smart out there. All right. So you watch Patrick Mahomes' game the last couple of years. Mahomes isn't quite as reckless as he was when maybe he was younger. And Jaxson Dart, you can draw that parallel. Even though Jaxson Dart got better at making decisions as a runner, there were still times when you said to yourself, He probably could have been a little bit more conservative there. So that's another aspect that I think Matt Nagy can maybe help Jaxson Dart with, because you know what? It's very hard to teach that to a quarterback. You can preach it until you're blue in the face. You can show him examples, but no two examples are ever the same. So who knows? Maybe Matt Nagy has a specific system where he says, okay, you know what? When we're inside the 20, then you go for it. You go for the goal. When we're outside of the 20, you be smarter and you get out of bounds. So whatever the system is, and that's a question obviously that we can ask him, once the hiring is official and the Giants put him on a conference call, which I believe they will do probably, I would say at some point next month, I would think would happen. All right. So that's another advantage. The other thing, again, there's that familiarity and that trust with Harbaugh. If you notice, a lot of the coaches that Harbaugh is bringing in are guys and gals. There's at least one gal on the staff that's been reported. These are all people that he's worked with. The Giants are under the proverbial gun, if you will, to hit the ground running with Harbaugh as the head coach. Harbaugh, when he spoke to the media during his introductory presser, basically said, we want to be in the playoffs this time next year, and we expect to be in the playoffs this time next year. So by bringing in familiar faces, and you can look to Chris Horton on special teams, Denard Wilson, defensive coordinator, and now Matt Nagy, they should be able to hit the ground running. It's not like, when Brian Daboll was hired, he hired a variety of different coaches from different trees, including, people he knew and people he didn't know. And they had to kind of just mesh together. And it took a little time for that to happen. So by bringing in Matt Nagy, now they have an idea. They say, okay, you know what? This is what we're still missing to make this offense run. So it's a little bit more clear, if you will, rather than just kind of guessing, okay, do we bring in this guy? Do we bring in that guy? What do we need? What do we want? Well, we don't know what we want because we're still trying to get to know each other as coaches. So there's that bigger picture item, if you will, in bringing in Matt Nagy. So overall, I mean, there's a lot to like about the Matt Nagy hire, I think, with the Giants. Now, there's obviously some concerns, which I'll get to in the next segment, but here's the benefit of the doubt you got to give the Giants in making this decision. They need continuity. They need an identity. And Matt Nagy should be able to give that to the offensive side of the ball, whether it's going to be, a vertical offense, whether it's going to be a lot of RPOs and zone reads, whatever the case may be, Nagy's going to bring them some kind of identity, which is going to help that team play faster. Because look, when you have an identity, when you know what you want, and look at the two Super Bowl participating teams, they both have identities. And when you have an identity and you know who you are and what you want to do and what you do well, you can play faster. So just imagine what the Giants will be able to do now that they have somewhat of an identity, or at least one that's in the works. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about the negatives. And there's not a whole lot in terms of the negatives, but being fair, we've got to mention them. So don't go anywhere. I'll have those for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, as the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-proportioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated number one by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease, and it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule. 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. Over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. Recipes are simple but feel elevated, even restaurant quality, with dishes co-created by chefs like Gordon Ramsay. Everything arrives pre-proportioned, so there's less prep, less mess, and no wasted food. It saves you time and money. Home Chef customers save an average of $86 per month on groceries. And now, for a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off their first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon to get 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Hey, Giant fans, let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets. That's where Gusto comes in, to take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so that you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassles or hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, which means no surprise charges at the end of the month. Gusto's automated tools like offer letters, onboarding materials, and direct deposits save hours every week. And knowing that you can reach a certified HR expert anytime gives you real peace of mind. So go on and try Gusto today at gusto.com/lockedonnfl and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/lockedonnfl. One more time, that's gusto.com/lockedonnfl. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and the Giants have an offensive coordinator, at least reportedly. It hasn't been announced by the team, so, obviously we have to say reportedly, but so far the reports have been pretty accurate, I would say. So anyway, Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator, we've just talked about the benefits of the hire. There are a few tiny concerns. These are so minor, but, look, we're trying to be balanced here in the coverage here. So I'm going to go over the concerns and sort of mitigate some of them for you. All right. So obviously the first one is, how long are the Giants going to have Matt Nagy for? Now, all coaches, assistant coaches, in particular the coordinators for the Giants, typically get a 3-year contract. But obviously, next head coaching cycle, if Matt Nagy gets interest, assuming he does well with the Giants, he might want to move on and become a head coach someplace. So you've got that factor. Because remember, Matt Nagy was trying to become a head coach, which is why he didn't re-up with Kansas City. And that didn't happen. So that's a minor thing. Obviously, if he draws that kind of interest, that means the offense was great. So we kind of want that, I guess. Okay, now, the other thing that kind of jumps out at you a little bit. You look at Kansas City in terms of their scoring, and they haven't really been a juggernaut, all right? The last 3 years, they ranked 15th, 15th, and 21st in scoring. Now, to that, I say this. How many times were the Chiefs in the Super Bowl the last 3 years? Twice. And how many of those games did they win? One. So at the end of the day, okay, maybe the Chiefs' offense wasn't the number one scoring offense. Maybe they weren't the number one overall offense or the number one rushing offense or the number one passing offense. But at the end of the day, folks, what's most important when it comes to a team, and particularly an offense? The answer is simple. Outscoring your opponent. You don't have to necessarily be a juggernaut. It's nice if you are. It's nice if, you can win every game by 2 or more scores. I know it makes my life easier when I have to write post-game stories, but it's not a requisite. You just have to outscore your opponent and hope that your defense limits the opponent to what they do. So really, that's not, for me, any kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm concerned about that. All right. Now, there were other things that popped up. The biggest one of which, and this was more when Matt Nagy was head coach of the Bears, and he was like the primary, I think, play caller for Chicago. A big criticism of him was his lack of adjustments when opponents figured out his game plan. That one I would say is maybe a legitimate concern. All right. Now, that being said, it's important to know that the offensive game plan is typically put together as a group effort. So it's not just the offensive coordinator going off to his office and drawing up the play card and saying that's it. You're going to have contributions from the run game coordinator, the pass game coordinator, the assistant coaches, on the offensive side of the ball. That's how it works. It's a collaborative effort. And at the end of the day, it's up to the offensive coordinator on game day to look at the big card and say, okay, I've got 5 options available for this scenario. I'm going to choose this one. So that's kind of how it works. All right. So that being said, it all comes down to, the identity. The Giants, in my opinion, and this applies to the defensive side of the ball as well as special teams, they've got to form an identity and say to their opponent, we're going to be us. We're going to run what we want to run. You figure out how to stop us. And here's why I think it's going to be different here for Matt Nagy in New York. All right. John Harbaugh has a track record of managing to stay a step ahead of his competition. So in other words, if you figure out his team, he somehow with his coaches comes up with new ways that puts them a step ahead of the competition. So it's like, okay, you figured this out? Well, we've got another trick up our sleeve. So that gives me hope that this relationship with Matt Nagy is going to work out and that the Giants offense is going to be simpler, that we're going to see fewer mistakes, fewer missed routes run, fewer false starts and drive-killing penalties, just more efficiency on offense, which is what this Giants team really needs. So I'm optimistic about it, all right, until further notice, until I see otherwise. But just based on, again, what I was able to gather about Matt Nagy, I think this is a good hire. So we will obviously see once the games start off. We got a long way to go before we get to that point, but there is optimism. And of course, one other thing to keep in mind is the Giants, because they have a new coaching staff, they're going to get an extra mini camp. So we'll start to get an idea once we get in the building to see what maybe they're doing differently and what they're asking of the players. So it's going to be fun for sure. All right, Giant fans, before we say goodbye on this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, thank you for making Locked On Giants part of your day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in America. If you're a true diehard New York Giants fan, check out our everyday all access tier. You'll get one-on-one text access with me, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store, regular video calls with me, and a whole lot more. Head on over to Locked On NY Giants, that's supercast.com, to join the Everydayer program and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes. All right, Giant fans, that does it for me. Again, I've got more episodes for you coming up this week. I'm going to try and get one of the guys from Locked On Chiefs to come on and give us a really detailed scouting report. So hopefully we'll have that for you tomorrow. If not, I'll keep at it. I'll find somebody who can maybe come on and give us a scouting report. So hope you'll check out upcoming episodes of Locked On Giants. Till next time, have a good one.